Welcome back to the London Futurist podcast. Our guest in this episode is Dr. Emil Kendziorra. Emil graduated summa cum laude, which means with the highest honours, from the University of Göttingen in Germany, having previously studied at the University of Pécs in Hungary. For several years, he then devoted himself to cancer research with the hope of contributing to longevity science. After realizing how slowly life extension research was progressing, he pivoted into entrepreneurship, and he has been CEO of multiple tech and medical companies, most recently as a founder and CEO of Medlanes and onFeedback, which were sold respectively to Zava and QuestionPro. Emil then decided to dedicate the next decades of his life, he says, to advancing medical biostasis and cryomedicine. He is currently the CEO of Tomorrow Bio and the president of the board at European Biostasis Foundation. Before continuing with the conversation, here's a short note added in post-production. At the very end of this episode, look out for a special offer from Tomorrow Bio available exclusively to listeners of the London Futurist podcast. Please don't miss it. Now, on to the main recording. Emil, welcome to the London Futurist podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for joining us, Emil.
Emil, before we talk about biostasis and cryomedicine, let's fill in a bit more of your background. What can you tell us about your experience as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so entrepreneurship was, for me, kind of a stepping stone. This was never originally the plan. The original plan was to study medicine, do a PhD after, and then go into academia, build a lab, and do the research that is required to extend life. But as you said, I got slightly disillusioned with the speed of academic research. Then after graduating, I was looking to do something to kind of, in quotation marks, bide the time until I find something where I felt like this has high impact in the field of longevity. The thing that I came up with was entrepreneurship, running tech companies, because a good amount of my high school friends were computer scientists, business people. So together with them, I started a company back then. The first one was a data analysis company, which we spun out of an agency that we ran during med school or during university. We ran that for a couple of years, then went into medtech. Medlanes was a medtech company, telemedicine, teleconsultations, remote diagnostics, and so on and so on. Not necessarily because I said, okay, I want to run these companies for the next 20 years. But back in the day, those companies looked like things that you can relatively quickly sell and then have the seed capital to do longevity stuff. Even though back then I didn't know what longevity stuff I wanted to do. But then in 2018 or so, while still running my medtech company, I talked to the board and said, okay, now I know what I want to do. I will leave the company at some point, which I then did at the end of 2019 to finally start with cryopreservation.
And what took you into the idea of cryopreservation, given that it's viewed by most people as pretty fringe?
The reason for that is mostly the speed of progress in all the other fields of longevity. Of course, coming from cancer research, I might have a slight bias here because cancer research is, I think, one of the very good examples how every 10 years you say it's another 10 years. For many, many times, cancer was just supposed to be cured around the corner. And of course, we're far from that even now. Cryopreservation doesn't have the best value proposition. Being cryopreserved and then maybe being revived in the future is significantly worse than the prospects of just taking a pill or treatment to living longer. But it is something that you can do right now. So I decided to go for that. Because of that reason, I went towards cryopreservation in addition because it's an engineering problem, more so than a research problem. And usually engineering problems are much simpler and much cheaper to solve. And last but not least, as it is a relatively small field, one extra person in that space, $1 extra in that space has significantly more impact than me running another partial reprogramming company or something in that space. And if I'm wrong, I'm happily wrong. I just take the pill that will be around, let's say, in 20, 30 years. but I want to make damn sure that I'm not going to be 85 at some point, dying of cancer, and there's no good cryopreservation.
So how do the organizations you run, Tomorrow Bio and the European Biostasis Foundation, how do they compare to the other existing cryonics organizations?
The fundamental value proposition is the same. The logic here is there are currently incurable diseases. If you get them, old age being one of them, the doctors can only tell you, listen, you have maybe 6 months to live. You're going to die, unfortunately. And then people have the choice to say, either I want to be cremated or buried, or I want to be cryopreserved. Fundamentally, that's what we do as well. But we have significantly more teams. We do what is called field cryoprotection, whole body field cryoprotection. I'm more than happy to elaborate, of course, on all of these, which brings higher quality preservation. We do significantly more quality checks and quality assurance. We're growing much, much faster, like somewhere between 5 to 10x faster than the next competitor. So fundamentally the same, but I would say similarly the same how a small taxi company and Uber is kind of doing the same thing. But then again, there's a big difference between these organizations.
So yes, was it field bioprotection? Was that the thing you said?
It's whole body field cryoprotection. That means that the whole procedure, the whole cryoprotection procedure is pretty much done on site. So let's say the patient, for argument's sake, dies in Italy or in London or in Portugal. We send one of our teams to the patient. The second the patient is pronounced, we take over, of course, given that all documents and everything is signed. And then we do the cryoprotection procedure, including all the replacement of the blood and water in the body against the cryoprotective agent on site.
Where they died, so they don't have to come to your facility, yeah.
Indeed. So neither do they come, nor do we just pick them up, let's say from Portugal, and then drive them 24 hours to Switzerland without having had that protecting procedure done already.
Yeah.
So on average, as much as we understand and as much as the community understands, that gives better quality end results.
And you don't have problems with the local medical authorities. They're quite happy for you to do that.
The logic of cryopreservation is always that you donate your body. The legal framework behind cryopreservation is always donation to a research organization. So the medical bodies, the FDA in the US or the EMA in Europe, whatever government body or governance body you have, once people have been legally pronounced, as a reminder, cryopreservation can only always start at the time of legal pronouncement. They don't deem themselves responsible anymore. Of course, sometimes we have problems with using hospital, like the venue and so on. That usually is not possible. But for that, we bring our own pretty much like mobile operating rooms that we build. And we bring those. And then with those, it's not an issue.
And your mobile operating room, is that in a van or an Arctic lorry? How do you transport that?
We buy ambulances, run-of-the-mill ambulances that would otherwise be used for emergency services. And then our engineers and medical staff retrofits them internally to be usable for cryopreservation. We have all the operation equipment. It's pretty much an operation room because cryopreservation, the procedure, is open heart surgery. It is just like in an OR where you would be put on a heart-lung machine. That's what you do to perfuse the cryoprotective agent.
And how many such ambulances do you have?
So we currently have 3 in Europe that belong to us, 2 in Berlin and 1 in Zurich. We have a couple of additional partners that we collaborate with. They're technically not on the payroll. They're like local teams in Italy, in France. The French one, they don't have an ambulance yet, but might at some point. We're in early talks having another one in the Nordics. Over time, we will add more and more, including a couple now in the US. So we're launching with 3 teams and 3 locations in the US as well.
Do you cover the UK?
We do. We don't have our own ambulance yet there. There are some pretty good teams in the UK that if push comes to shove, you could collaborate with, or we just bring a team. Our standard model is not necessarily that we need a team on site, It's more so that if something happens, we send one of these ambulances before the patient dies, dispatch to wherever the patient is, and then, in quotation marks, wait around until something happens, until the person is pronounced, and then take over.
That might sometimes take quite a while. Sometimes dying is a long, drawn-out experience.
Indeed, yeah. Predicting when someone is dying is indeed quite difficult. So the model is built in a way so that you can dispatch a team early and then wait around for a week or even longer than that.
One way you can predict somebody's death is if they, I'm not sure what the right verb is, but commit euthanasia, seek euthanasia perhaps. I've often wondered why Dignitas doesn't offer cryopreservation as an option. Have you talked to them?
Not directly. And to be fair, we don't want to be involved in that euthanasia process too much for legal reasons, for moral reasons, and so on. Even though, of course, I think it's very much up to the individual to decide that. Combining these two topics, and this is also why I think the existing organizations have not started too many collaborations here, is because cryopreservation can be a bit of a contentious topic. Euthanasia, even though in Switzerland and other countries it's legal, not in Switzerland technically actually, but you can do it. But it is still a contentious topic, at least in some parts of the population. And usually then no one is really up for combining two contentious topics.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm sure that the question that our audience is just gagging for us to ask you is, how much does this cost?
Right. So cryopreservation has two funding mechanisms. If you say, I want to be cryopreserved tomorrow because I have a terminal condition right now, then the cost for whole body cryopreservation is at a minimum 200,000.
Is that euros?
That is euros, yeah. 200,000 euros. You can also choose to just have your brain cryopreserved, in which case it would be 75,000. But pretty much no one pays that out of pocket. In most cases, what people do, they sign up with us much, much earlier, decades earlier. And then we have a large life insurance partner. You take out life insurance in the amount of 200,000, for example. And then should you die, the life insurance pays out. You pay an annual or a monthly fee to fund your life insurance contract. So that's the standard way how to do that.
Fascinating. Well, let me give you an entirely hypothetical individual.
Sure.
Let's say he's about 65 years old and he lives in Surbiton in England.
Yeah.
He's an entirely hypothetical person.
Absolutely.
What would it cost him to take out life insurance and stop being a cryocrastinator?
So there's two types of life insurance. There's term life insurance and there's whole life insurance. And to be fair with the hypothetical UK person, I don't know, there might be other types of life insurance in the UK, but these are the ones that at least we deal mostly with. Term life insurance is you take it out. It's basically a risk insurance. It has an end date. Now, with the life insurance partner that we work with, you can sign up if you're younger than 73, and then the maximum coverage duration is until the 85th birthday, or I think until the end of that year. So with that, it's probably depending on how healthy the person is. Let's say you're relatively healthy. In that case, it's probably £100 per month, maybe a bit less. If you take out whole life insurance, which is basically a savings plan with a payout option at the end, that is probably a bit higher, but then it's your money, right? So basically you just put money into kind of a savings account, and the savings account, in quotation marks, has the option that should you die, the amount is being paid out to a third party to cover your cryopreservation cost.
Which would mean that as a savings plan, if you changed your mind during the course of the insurance coverage, you could take that money out again. It would still be your money. Is that right?
Right.
Wow.
Any day of the week. With term life insurance, this does not work. Term life insurance is basically an insurance, just like a car insurance. If you don't have a car crash, you're not getting money back. If you decide to not want to do it, you're not getting money back. You stop paying. But with the whole life insurance, and in some countries they have index-backed insurance, a lot of variety and similar things. If that's the case, then if you decide to not want to continue doing that, then yes, it's just your money. You just stop paying and you get everything back that's in that account.
And that, you say, would be a little bit more expensive, but not massively.
That depends on how life insurances, how they're allowed to invest. The US, as an example, these index-backed insurances, they're comparatively relatively cheap because basically the insurance company invests the money that you give them in the stock market or something similar. And then you just benefit from compounding interest and compounding return over many years. Whereas in Germany, as an example, if you take out whole life insurance companies in Germany are required to invest the customer's money at very, very, very low risks, meaning you underperform the market, statistically speaking. And again, if you underperform the market for the next 30 years or so, you lose a good amount of money. So it depends on the type of insurance, what is allowed in that country. But in some countries, life insurance companies can invest at market rates, then usually they're not that much more expensive.
Those numbers are actually not terribly high. I'm actually quite surprised. 75,000 as a one-off, that would fall within the capabilities of a lot of people, and I think certainly £100 a month would. Do most people go for whole body or brain? I would have thought the brain is the part of you that you really want to recover.
It very much is. But most people go for whole body.
Why is that?
So I think there's a couple of reasons. First of all, initially we only started with whole body. We didn't have brain only initially. So there's a bit of a legacy bias in that direction. The additional reason is, first of all, I very much agree, of course, that as much as we understand, definitely the brain is the thing to keep. The other reason is we do, in fact, recommend whole body. The reason is just for an abundance of caution. Not because I think there's anything important in the gut neurons or whatever that sometimes might be discussed in certain circles. But it's possible that there might be certain revival techniques where it is easier and cheaper to revive a whole body as opposed to somehow recreating the rest of the body. And of course, again, I'm speaking here out of an abundance of caution. If I would be a betting man, I would say this is not the case. Brain only is totally fine. But this is a choice where you only make that choice once. And then our average member, so people who sign up with us, on average, they're relatively young. They're somewhere between 35 and 45. So if you take out life insurance, if you want your coverage around 75,000 euros or 200,000 euros, if you do this very early, the difference between in monthly contribution between these two payout amounts is very negligible. So people might as well take out whole body. But in general, yes, brain only probably is totally fine.
But our hypothetical 65-year-old living in London, for him, the difference might be more significant.
Yeah. If you would need to pay out of pocket or don't have that much time to have compounding interest to work, there it makes more sense. And in fact, you can always upgrade. So you can start with a brain-only contract. And then if you reconsider, you can always, in quotation marks, of course, upgrade to whole body. The important part is that if someone says, I want to do this at some point, then it's a good idea to do it tomorrow. Because unfortunately, we have that, twice a year or so, where we know people want to sign up and then they do die without having signed up. Some of them then hope and rely on their family cryopreserving them. And in our experience, and I'm pretty sure all other organizations would say the same, this has never worked. It's then, unfortunately, then these people are not being cryopreserved. And if they are cryopreserved with a tremendous amount of delay, which is detrimental to quality.
Do the costs that you've quoted, do they include the standby teams?
Yeah.
Do they include membership fees for helping to run the organization and research?
They do not include membership fees, but they do include everything else. So there's an additional membership fee, which is currently 25 euros a month, which will go up to 50 euros a month very soon, at the end of this month, in fact. And if people sign up now, they lock in the old membership fee of 25 euros a month. That's the only addition, but the lump sum payment, the one-time fee, includes everything else. It includes standby, it includes cool down, it includes long-term storage. It's basically A to Z.
What's your confidence that somebody who is well cryopreserved will have their brain sufficiently intact that can be brought back in due course to a state of consciousness?
Right. That's unfortunately impossible question to answer, at least not with any scientific grounding. So I think there's a couple of ways how you can answer that question. On one hand, there's researchers that are pretty confident that this is going to work with a high degree of percentages. There's also other researchers that say it's close to zero. I think the best way to think about it is two things. Depending on your personal worldview, and I think most people who are considering cryopreservation have that in their worldview, if they die, this is it. There's no heaven or living on or anything in that direction. So one way to think about it, it's in infinity times better than cremation. And the other way, and I think this is the most honest way to think about it, cremation is zero. It's definitely better than that. It's not like you pay the money today, right? So if you sign up with us, we're not asking you to wire 200K tomorrow. The 200K need to be only provided at the time of death. You don't need to send us the money. In fact, we don't even want the money earlier because we would need to put it on a truster account and it's all complex. So it stays your money. You just pay membership fee, which is soon $50 a month. But how high the chance exactly is in percentages? To answer that, you would have needed to do it once. You need to have brought back a person. In fact, a couple of times, or have any data that is a bit closer than what we currently have.
Some people say there would be a higher probability of eventual reanimation if instead of freezing or vitrifying, instead of cryopreservation of the brain, they instead plastinate it or chemopreserve it. Mm-hmm. For example, Callum and I spoke a few episodes back to Kenneth Hayworth, who said that his investigation showed that that was something that would preserve more of the structure of a brain. In such a case, the brain which has been plastinated almost certainly could not be reanimated, and that process would rely on data being copied from that preserved lump of brain into a new brain. Do you have any views on that debate? Are you holding out the possibility of chemopreservation, or are you strongly advocating cryopreservation?
One of the reasons why we call the organization and the foundation Biostasis is because in the naming, it already implies that we are interested and open for different types of biostasis, which would encompass chemical or aldehyde stabilized cryopreservation or just chemical fixation as well. And in fact, under certain circumstances, we do chemical-based, what we call immersion vitrifixation, which is a combination of a chemical fixation first and then a cryopreservation after. We do this already now under certain circumstances. I think the best way to think about this topic is, first of all, I don't think that being chemically fixed locks you in to some kind of science fiction sounding upload scenario where you need to copy the brain or whatever. In any case, revival from these preserved states requires extremely advanced technology, which at least in principle might also be able to break these chemical bounds, what chemical fixation does. Is that going to be easy? No, but then again, revival from, in quotation marks, normal vitrification-based cryopreservation is also not easy. The downside of this chemical fixation is that under certain circumstances in the field, it's very difficult to do, just logistics. Like cryopreservation, human cryopreservation is this kind of unique combination of medicine, of emergency medicine, of cryopreservation or fixation technology, and logistics. And from a logistical standpoint, these chemical fixations are quite difficult to do. You need very low ischemia. You can only do it if you get access to a body very quickly after circulatory arrest, which in some countries, logistically, sometimes is just not possible. How we currently do it, we do different types of preservation based on the logistics. So if we're there very, very fast, we do a vitrification-based perfusion with a cryoprotective agent. If there's a bit more time, we do an immersion-based vitrifixation, which again is a combination of chemical fixation and cryopreservation and so on. In general, we are very open to it, and our organization offers both and changes the technique based on the circumstances.
Very interesting. I want to take us slightly into the area of science fiction. Imagine somebody is cryopreserved and they wake up in a reasonably distant future, as long ahead as 30 or 40 years, and we've got a superintelligence which has taken over control of the planet, as superintelligence probably will. And it turns out that it's all gone rather badly, and it's a rather malign superintelligence. And it wakes you up and says, hello, meet your friendly superintelligence ruler. I am now going to torture you forever. Does that idea put people off? And is there anything you can do to assure people that that could not possibly happen?
No, I cannot assure that this can't possibly happen. Science fiction-wise, it's within the realm of possibilities. But I think there's a couple of arguments that this is very unlikely. First of all, I think malicious superintelligence is at least as unlikely as benevolent superintelligence. Aligning superintelligence is very tough, and aligning it in a way that it's super mean to humans is also probably very tough to do. Let's assume we are actually in that world. I think the likelihood that the superintelligence deems it to be the best idea to revive old people to torture them instead of just creating more humans to torture them, right? I mean, if we're really going to be accepting these premises of that world, I think it's negligibly likely. I know at least one person who says, this is why I'm not signing up for cryopreservation. But for 99.9 and whatever percent, this is not the deciding factor.
I'm sorry to say I've just doubled that number for you, because although I'm not that person, I do know somebody who wouldn't do cryopreservation for exactly that reason.
It might be the same person, even though I don't think probably statistically it won't be.
No, it isn't. I'm sure it isn't.
Yeah. Of course, it's possible. But the arguments of superintelligence, of course, always is that the goals have nothing to do with human goals. So it might need the atoms of us being preserved, but bringing us back to torture us, I think that's negligibly unlikely. I think that the likelihood is either you don't come back or you come back, and if you come back, it's utopia-like. Not utopia as in your wildest dreams, but utopia as in better world than today.
Since you mentioned utopia, let me give you a better word than utopia.
Yeah.
Utopia's got so many problems, two big ones in particular. One is that it's impossible. The universe isn't really configured to have a utopia in it. And secondly, there's no change in utopia, which means there's no surprises and there's no fun. So utopia is a bad idea. Kevin Kelly, the founding editor of Wired, came up with the idea of protopia, which is a world in which everything is really, really good. It's not perfect, but it's really, really good. And every day and every month, because of technological improvement, it just keeps getting a bit better. And I think that's a brilliant thing to aim for.
Yeah, I think that's the likely case. It's just a world that is a certain amount better than ours today. And depends on how long we're going to be cryopreserved, how much better. But I think the likelihood that you wake up in a dystopian future is very unlikely. You just don't wake up. Dystopian futures don't have interests in bringing you back and having you around.
So I have a question about the future as well, but hopefully less science fiction-y. You said, Emil, you wanted to dedicate some decades in your life to this topic.
Yeah.
In a couple of decades' time, what will success look like? What are you hoping the biostasis universe is going to be like in 2035?
Yeah, so before starting out, I wrote a blog article / manifesto kind of thing saying, hey, 20 years, this is what I'm going to dedicate my next 20 years to. I think it will probably be longer than that. And maybe even until I'm being cryopreserved. At least since now doing this for a couple of years, I have not found anything that came close to me changing my mind here. There's a couple of things that I would say would mean success maybe in 10 or 20 years. So we think about cryopreservation on a scientific side with two kind of main focuses. One is improving the quality of an average cryopreservation. So historically, if you look at the distribution of how good the quality of a certain cryopreservation case is, it's all over the place. There's good cryopreservation, but there's a super long tail of very bad cryopreservations. So one thing is, how can you get the average cryopreservation closer to a good cryopreservation? The other main push would be, maybe there's two more. The other main push would be to make a good cryopreservation significantly better. Meaning that you can show that there's a very good ultrastructure preservation, meaning the parts inside the cells, everything in what you can see in electron microscopy looks good, looks like how much we understand in neuroscience right now that this is how it's supposed to look. No ice crystal formation and so on. And then from a basic science perspective, in a couple of decades, it would be great to be able to cryopreserve and then resuscitate and bring back and revive some mammal or rat, for argument's sake, so that you can show that in principle you can do this. And then, of course, like all these meta things, like having more cryopreservation storage facilities, making the whole structure more resistance, right? Having multiple facilities in different geopolitical areas to mitigate for geopolitical risk and so on. Getting better at these areas, that would be the goal for the next 10 to 20 years. I think bringing someone back from cryostasis, a human, it's totally out of the question, unrealistic. But the other things I think you can reasonably achieve.
And at the moment, is the main determinant of whether you get a good cryo or a bad cryo, is it the speed of access to the deceased person? Or is it more about their state of health when they die?
It's mostly the speed of access. But there are certain ways how you can die that are really problematic, like stroke, for example, being one of them. Neurodegeneration, like Alzheimer's and these kinds of things. But on average, people die because of cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and so on. So in most cases, it is due to how fast the teams are, how quick we are being told, and so on.
We spoke to Max Moore a few weeks ago, who, as you know, was for many years the CEO of Alcor, another cryonics body. And he made the slightly cynical, slightly dark humor remark that cancer is a really good way to go because you can be in reasonably good condition when you die, unlike with a stroke or dementia.
Yeah, as crazy as it sounds, for cryopreservation, cancer is a good way to die. I mean, it depends a bit. There are certain cancers where you have a large amount of pain, where even pain medication can't really solve it. So not every cancer. But if you want to be well cryopreserved, the advantage of cancer is that you still can organize things. At least in most cases, you have all your mental faculties. If you die out of neurodegeneration, it's very tough. Stroke, of course, similarly, if not worse.
Yeah. And can I ask, how many patients do you have at the moment? How many have you got signed up and how many have you got stored so far?
Yeah, so signed up, maybe we already passed it, but somewhere in the ballpark of 600. Some people think it's very high. I feel like it should be much, much higher. But then if you compare it to the other organizations who took, I think, 50-something years to get to 1,600, it's much faster. From a patient standpoint, of course, it will take a good amount of time until we take over. I think we're going to be the largest organization on membership very soon, probably even next year. But patients will take a long time. So I think we're at 7 right now. There's a good amount of additional pets, but we don't count pets, so we don't count these as patients. I'm not sure if other organizations do. I don't think they do either. And we do a lot of training cases. On a cryopreservation basis, we do like another 15 or so, maybe even 20 cases per year. Just training, just going through the motions to train our medical teams, but these are not being preserved.
Last question for me. You mentioned, Emil, various kinds of progress you hope to see. For example, in due course, the revival of a small mammal. What kind of research do you think would make the most difference? And what can the rest of us do to encourage and support that research?
Unfortunately, in science, it's always a long list of small things. It's usually not this one thing that just needs to be figured out, at least not in biomedical science. If there is one thing for resuscitating mammals, it would be warming technology. How to warm up large volumes quick. One of the reasons why cryopreservation is currently a one-way street is because you cannot warm up a large volume, and humans count as large volumes. So do rats for that argument here. You cannot warm them up uniformly. You can warm them up on the outside real quick, but inside they would form ice during warm-up. So uniformly warming up large volumes is one of the challenges that we're currently facing.
People are doing research with microwaves of some sort. Is that right?
Yeah, there's three technologies pretty much. One is microwave, one is nano-rewarming, where you have ferromagnetic particles in an electromagnetic field. And then last would be high-frequency ultrasound. These are kind of the three main areas that are being currently researched. Certain organizations, certain research labs, everybody has their favorite. I think all of them might have a shot. So more research in that field would definitely be interesting.
I have a final question as well, which is you mentioned that if people sign up today, that the membership would be €25. So how long would that lock that level in?
Oh, forever.
Forever. Interesting.
Forever, apart from inflation adjustment.
Okay.
So it's possible that if inflation goes up, like, if you've been a member for 25 years, at some point we need to do some inflation adjustments. So we've decided that on prices, if you sign up with us, we only do inflation.
Right.
We're not increasing your membership fees. We give you the option, if there's new technology coming out, if we recommend it, we give you the option to upgrade to that new option. But we never want to tell someone, you cannot be cryopreserved because we increased our prices and you just don't make the cut anymore. This is not acceptable. So we might increase prices for new members, but we do everything in our power to just do inflation adjustment for people who do sign up.
That's very interesting. I imagine there might be quite a few people in our audience who are cryocrastinators like David and me. And this early bird opportunity of €25 signing in by the end of this month. Is that right?
Yeah, by the end of the month. Exactly. So last month and this month, we've never had more signups.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
These were the best months ever by a large margin, because as you said, there's a lot of people out there who at some point have made the call, I want to do this in principle. I've just not gotten around, for a long list of reasons, to do it tomorrow.
Here's another note added in post-production. This episode was recorded at the end of June, and the particular offer mentioned by Emil in this conversation has now expired. However, thanks to Tomorrow Bio, a different offer has been created exclusively for listeners to the London Futurists podcast who decide to become members of Tomorrow Bio after listening to this conversation. When signing up online, you can use the code London Futurist, which is all one word, with all letters in capitals, and with the word futurist as singular futurist rather than plural futurists. This code will reduce the cost of monthly or annual subscriptions by 30%. That's 30%. Some small print. This offer doesn't apply to lifetime subscriptions and is only available to new members of Tomorrow Bio. Importantly, this offer will expire on 15th September 2024, so don't delay if you want to take advantage of it. Now, back to the close of our conversation.
And to give those people an added incentive, does the membership help pay for any of the research that you're doing, or does it just cover the sort of administration costs?
It does a couple of things. The membership is mainly there to keep the medical teams around, keep them trained and on standby if something happens to you. So they're mostly there to pay for something that you need. And then in addition to that, if there's extra money, the money is being used for research and engineering and improving technology and so on. We have some members who don't even have cryopreservation funding in place, which I strongly would not recommend, but they just said, I want to sign up because I want to support you guys. Technically, it's possible, but of course, we would always strongly recommend to sign up with us and then put funding in place. But technically, you can separate these two things.
Very interesting. Well, I think you've just got a new signature because I'm going to sign up.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emil. That's been very clear.
Thanks for having me, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Emil. That was great.